Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan. And this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. Now, I've got a question for you. What would you do if suddenly you couldn't operate your body like you used to? Would you give up? Would you find yourself in a pit of despair? Well, today's guest is living proof that a broken body doesn't mean a broken spirit. In 1970, Ken Kunken was a Cornell football player whose life changed in a split second after spinal cord injury left him paralyzed from the shoulders down. But that moment wasn't the end of his story. It was actually the beginning of a legacy. Ken went on to become the first quadriplegic to graduate from Cornell University, not once, but twice, earning both his undergraduate and master's degrees before going on to Columbia Hofstra Law and a 40-year career in the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. I hope I said that right. He's a father, an author, a fierce advocate, and a man who's climbed countless steps, literal and figurative, so others could find smoother paths behind him. His memoir, I Dream of Things That Never Were, isn't just a title. It's a blueprint for resilience, justice, and unshakable purpose. So, Ken, welcome to the show. How are you doing today? This is awesome.
Thank you, Keegan, and I'm doing great today. Thank you for having me as your guest.
Of course, it is an absolute honor and a pleasure to speak to someone such as an esteemed, well, everything. You're an advocate, you're a lawyer, you're just a whole bunch in one package. So, how did you get to where you are today?
With a lot of help. It took a lot of help from a very special family and group of friends, and they were
Mhm.
with me every step of the way.
Oh man, I love hearing that because, it's not often I actually hear some people say, I got a lot of help from the outside. And I think that that is super duper important to actually recognize and pay tribute to.
Thank you. Well, I was very fortunate because I know not everybody has the help that I was able to receive. So
Mm,
I was fortunate that my family rallied around me and basically indicated that they would act as my arms and legs if need be to allow me to still do everything I wanted to do in my life.
oh man, that is way too cool. And you're right. You're absolutely lucky to have that because not everyone does. And I think that that's kind of what you advocate for, right? Is to help people with disabilities.
Absolutely.
Um, so real quick, how did you decide? Well, actually, let's go all the way back real quick. What happened with your football incident? Because that is a literal snap of the fingers, and suddenly your life changed. How did that make you actually feel and respond?
Right. Well, this happened in 1970. I was
Hmm.
20 years old. I was early in my junior year at Cornell University, where I was studying industrial engineering.
Okay.
And I was playing on Cornell's lightweight football team. We had a special football league for individuals that were slightly smaller than the heavyweight team. We had a team where you had to weigh 154 pounds or less 2 days before the game to play.
Oh wow.
And it was a special league. It's now called sprint football.
Okay.
And even in that league, I was one of the smaller players because I naturally weighed under 150, while most of the people on the team weighed above it and would lose weight right before the game to weigh in.
Oh man.
So I was one of the smaller players,
Hmm.
and I got hurt on a kickoff. I was running down the field in a game against Columbia University, and
Hmm.
when I tackled the ball carrier, I broke my neck and severely damaged my spinal cord. And as a
Oh.
result, I'm almost totally paralyzed from the shoulders down. So I now have a little bit of movement in my left arm, but nothing in my fingers or wrist. And on the right side of my body, I could just shrug my shoulder a bit.
Huh.
So, other than that limited movement, I'm pretty much paralyzed from the shoulders down.
Oh man. I can't imagine being paralyzed even just a little bit because I'm just one of those outdoors kind of people, and the closest thing I've gotten to was breaking my femur, and that sucked. So I can't imagine anywhere not moving even my arms. Were you actually like really in the pits of despair, like in the throes of it, or did you see
Egan,
light?
I don't think you could have gotten any lower than I was following my injury.
Yeah.
I was about as depressed as anybody could possibly be.
Mm. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. But you were able to actually turn it around though. What was the spark that made you go, I can do something different?
Well, once again, it was definitely my family. They kept encouraging me and kept assuring me that as long as I still had my mind intact, there was an awful lot that I could still do. And it was very frustrating because, while it did not affect me intellectually, I felt like the medical personnel were treating me as if I no longer had a brain in my head.
Ooh,
They would come into the room and speak to the person next to me and ask them questions about me as if I couldn't speak for myself or wasn't even in the room. And that certainly was very frustrating.
yeah.
And then, since they didn't seem to want to answer my questions, I got a hold of a pamphlet that the rehab facility published. And with somebody turning the pages, they showed me, what the ramifications of my spinal cord injury were. And it
Mm-hmm.
indicated what type of movement I might have from my level of injury. I'm hurt between the fourth and fifth cervical in the neck, where
Yeah.
my level of sensation would be. And I have no feeling a couple inches below my shoulders and down. I could only feel above that. And it also indicated what type of career I may eventually go into. And
Mm.
the only job I saw for somebody in my condition would be to someday sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. And I
Oh.
was devastated when I saw that. Now, again, this was well before laptop computers,
Mm-hmm.
and I really wasn't able to do anything physical other than eventually I learned how to operate an electric wheelchair
Mm-hmm.
and type a little bit on an IBM Selectric typewriter with certain braces and splints.
Mm-hmm.
And with a lot of difficulty, I could turn pages of a book. But other than that, there was very little I could do for myself.
Oh man.
But I still hoped that there was more that I could do than just selling magazine subscriptions over the telephone.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, selling magazines over the telephone, that is definitely not something suited for someone that has the brain that you do. And that would have definitely been a huge blow to like ego whenever medical professionals don't even want to talk to you. Like that sounds really, really like malpractice-y almost.
And Keegan, what you need to remember is at the time I was studying engineering at one of the most prestigious engineering schools in the country.
Yeah.
And now they're talking about selling magazine subscriptions over the telephone. If I'm lucky, that's the best I could do. Excuse me, just one moment.
Okay.
Thank you. That's actually a blood pressure pill. I have
Oh,
problems regulating my blood pressure, and that's a pill to actually raise my blood pressure.
no, to raise it.
Yeah, most people have trouble lowering it. I have trouble raising it.
Well, I mean, I guess that would kind of make sense since you can't really move your body the same,
Right.
right?
Yes. And the muscle tone is gone, so
Mm.
there's no real pressure on my blood vessels to
Oh.
keep my pressure up.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't even really too aware of the rest of the body not even kind of having any kind of tone. And that's one of the things a lot of people think is like tone is just like how strong you are or something. It's just, no, it's how like contracted the muscles actually are subconsciously, right? And so you essentially know what it's like to be a rag doll in a sense,
You
right?
bet.
Um, Man, and that is not fun because it's kind of like, have you ever felt like you're a marionette or something?
Let me tell you a little bit about the strangest sensation I ever had.
Go for it.
When I tackled the ball carrier, I
Hmm.
remained conscious the whole time.
Mm.
But as I indicated, I suddenly lost all movement
Hmm.
below my shoulders, but I also lost my level of sensation.
Huh.
And when they put me on a stretcher
Uh-huh.
and lifted me up to carry me off the field, it felt like I had been decapitated and they were only carrying my head off the field because I couldn't feel the rest of my body.
Huh. I've never thought about that. Whoa, yeah, holy cow. I'm trying to just picture that in my head, and that would be the strangest thing ever by far. Holy cow. Okay, yeah, I can't even kind of compare to that. Um, but that must have really been dizzying, and not just in the literal sense, but that would have started the staircase of like, what am I going to do now? Like, is this forever kind of thing? Did that feeling of it being only your head kind of go away?
You know, I knew very little about spinal cord injuries back then. Most people knew very little about spinal cord injuries.
Mm.
I mean, you have to remember this was about 25 years before Christopher Reeve's injury.
Oh wow.
Now, Christopher Reeve was a tremendous spokesman for spinal cord injuries,
Hmm.
and he educated a lot of people on the ramifications of it. But I was heard about 25 years before Christopher Reeve.
Hmm.
So not too many people knew much about spinal cord injuries, at least in the public. And
Yeah.
I certainly didn't know anything about it. So I didn't know what was going on with my body. And I
Mm.
remember when I was speaking to the doctor while I was laying on the field, I asked him, I'll be able to move again, won't I, doc? And he said, I don't know. And that really shocked me. I was sure he was going to say, yes, it'll just take a few minutes. And when he said, I don't know, that really was a shock.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I'm going to jump back to my broken femur real quick, just for the sheer fact that we have a parallel right there. Because whenever the paramedics got there, they after the drywall got lifted off of me, my leg was definitely broken, and the paramedic just looked at me and said, "Yep, that's broke. You're not walking off." And I was like, "What? Of course I." Rah!" But that was the thing, is that I was able to just, I was very angry at my injury because it could have been avoided, and yours not so much, right? It was something that, who would have thought going to play football would have just changed your life in so many ways.
I didn't know it was even a possibility. I thought here I was doing what everything was encouraging people to do, to
Hmm.
be physically active
Hmm.
and play basically the all American sport, football.
Yeah.
So it was not something that I was prepared in any way, shape, or form to experience a spinal cord injury. And in
Yeah.
fact, to make it even stranger, all our games were filmed. So while I was still in the hospital, I asked the coach to bring the game film to the hospital so I could watch it to
Hmm.
see exactly what happened.
Oh.
And over the years, I must have watched that play 100 times.
Oh
And I
yeah.
still couldn't tell you why I broke my neck.
Oh man. So it, oh man, it's one of those things where it's like, was it fate? Was it by design or anything? And then like, that would just ultimately make me go, curse you divine, or whatever, you know?
Keegan, I'm sorry to interrupt for a minute,
No,
but when
go.
you say was it fate, strangely, I actually had a premonition that I was going to get hurt that season.
Whoa.
And it's real tough for me to explain and even rationalize in my mind.
Hmm.
But at the beginning of the season, I had such a strong feeling that I was going to get hurt that year playing ball that I actually verbalized it to my roommate. I
Uh-huh.
said one day before the season started, I said, John, his name was John, I don't know what it is. I just have this very strong feeling I'm going to get hurt this season. And
Uh,
he, of course, said, what do you mean? I said, I don't know. I just have this feeling. And I broke my neck the first tackle I made that year.
oh,
How do you explain that?
I don't know. Did you knock on wood after saying that?
I just figured it was such a strange feeling that I don't know why I was thinking of it. I played a lot of years of organized football,
Hmm.
and I just tried to put it out of my mind.
Oh man.
Later, Keegan, I mentioned that years later to one of my aunts, and she said, did it ever occur to you not to play football that year? And it actually never occurred to me. I never thought maybe I shouldn't play. It just never occurred to me.
Well, so let's look at it from the lens of maybe it was fate, or maybe it was designed, or whatever angle we want to take it from. It happened, and so we're just going to say it turned out for the absolute best in some regards. I'm sure you probably have some reservations about still wanting to move your body, but you've done so much good for everyone in the regards of disability, correct?
I've tried to make the best of a bad situation. And
Yeah.
with a lot of people's help, I was determined to still lead a useful and productive life.
Mm. And so, what were the first steps, and like literal and figurative, that you had to do and actually just doing again? Because for a little bit, you're probably just sitting there, just ingesting everything that's going around and stuff, and now suddenly you have the spark to do something. So, what was that?
Let me pick up on your words. What were the first steps? I had a
Sorry.
vocational counselor at the Rusk Institute encouraging me to go back to school and continuing my education.
Mm-hmm.
Her name was Joyce Mesh. And my grandparents, my family were all encouraging me to go on and return to school. In my mind, what school should I go back to? I wanted to go back to Cornell,
Mm-hmm.
where I was when I got hurt. I mean, in my mind, I basically, if you would have spoken to a doctor, he would have told you I wasn't accepting my injury. I
Oh.
was trying as best I could to ignore it and do everything that I would have done had I not been injured.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go back to Cornell just 11 days after I was discharged from the hospital.
Wow.
And it probably was not the smartest move to go back to Cornell. This was about 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect,
Mm.
where facilities had to be made more accessible to people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Cornell was one of the least accessible campuses I could have chosen to go to.
Oh no.
Cornell's on a very hilly terrain in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every one of its buildings has steps in front of it,
Yeesh.
and there was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus. So
Ugh.
when you say what were the first steps I took, well, on my first day of class, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps
Goosh.
just to go to classes my first day.
Oh man. That is terrible. And I mean, whenever you put it into that kind of perspective, it really does make me go like, I take a lot of things for granted, and I'm sure a lot of people do too, because going around parking lots and stuff like that, you see those handicap spots and the little ramp for people on wheelchairs or whatever to get up. And like, I'm a copier technician by day, so I have to push those things up that ramp. If those ramps weren't there, a lot of people wouldn't be getting their copier.
Right. Well, they didn't even have those ramps back then.
Yeah.
They were just an afterthought. And you
Hmm.
didn't see, quadriplegics attending most schools, let alone Cornell.
Hmm.
So that was not even a thought to have ramps there back then.
Yeah, and you had said something about earlier, people not understanding spinal cord injuries, and you have to like give credit a little bit to people because in movies, if someone breaks their neck, they're just gone. It's just done and over. But you're not, and it's like so you're in this weird limbo space that not a lot of people got to experience before.
When my family consulted with a specialist about my condition, he told them that I probably wouldn't live through the week.
Whoa.
He told my family that if I were to survive, I would have no movement, I would not be able to do anything, and my life expectancy would be between 5 and 9 years, and I'd probably live the rest of my life in a nursing home.
Oh,
So that was what the specialist told my family.
oh man. So much for a specialist. He didn't know what he was talking about.
Well, it's more than 54 years later. He's probably dead now, and I'm still here. In fact, this doctor actually said to my family, if he were my son, I would just let him go.
Oh, no way.
That's what the doctor told my family.
No. Mm-mm. No, no, that's not cool. That's not a doctor. I'm glad he's probably dead. So, and I don't say that often, but that's kind of not cool, man. Um, but whenever you got back to Cornell, what were your classmates' reactions? Because I'm sure that would have been something new to explore as well, right?
It sure was, and very few expected me to come back. And
Mm.
in fact, after one of my first days of classes, I was approached by a student on campus, and he asked me if I was Ken Kunken because my accident had gotten a lot of publicity.
Mm-hmm.
And when I said that I was, he asked, "Aren't you supposed to be in the hospital?" That was the attitude back then. You should be in the hospital, not back in school with everybody else.
Hmm. So it's almost did you almost feel like a leper at some point?
You know, it was very strange because I was being stared at wherever I went. And
Mm,
I knew it was not out of animosity, it was more out of curiosity. I mean, for one, nobody was used to seeing somebody in my condition on a college campus. I
mhm,
mean, I was not only just in a wheelchair, but I couldn't use my arms either.
mm,
So it looked even stranger because if I went to the cafeteria to have lunch, I needed somebody feeding me.
mm,
Right? You're not used to seeing an adult being fed.
yeah,
So wherever I went, I was being stared at. And I
mm,
always felt I was a bit of an introvert before my injury. So I wanted to draw as less, the least amount of attention as I could to myself.
mhm.
And instead, wherever I went, I was being stared at.
Oh man. And that how did that really make you like react on the outside? Because you can't do a whole lot whenever it comes to expressing yourself, except for maybe giving people the little mean eye, just
It was really difficult. And just so you know, in my rehab, with a lot of effort, I was actually able to feed myself a little bit with some braces and splints.
Oh.
And I remember one day I went to the cafeteria and I had my attendant set me up with my braces and splints.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very slow, difficult process. And I would try to feed myself a little bit, with a fork that had a swivel on the end. And it was an effort just getting food to my mouth. So I
Yeah.
really had to concentrate. And at one point, I looked up, and Keegan, everyone in the cafeteria was staring at me, watching me
Mm.
eat. And I don't mean just a few people, I mean everyone in the cafeteria was staring at me, watching me eat. I became so uncomfortable, I ate the rest of my meals in my room the rest of the year.
Oh man. I can only imagine that. I mean, it would have been cool if they gave you an applause. Would that have changed everything?
Actually, I wanted to just crawl into a hole and not be seen at all.
Yeah.
I didn't want any attention.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I was receiving a lot of it. And part of that had to do with a lot of publicity that I had gotten. And, I
Mm.
guess it's only natural when you see somebody that you've just read about in the paper, you look at them more intensely. And I was getting a lot of publicity because it was unusual for a football player to break his neck, go through the hospital stay and rehab, and go back to school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting a lot of publicity, and many of the classes at Cornell were on tiers, they're on levels. So
Mm-hmm.
out of necessity, I had to sit in front of the front row.
Mm.
So as a result, even if people didn't want to stare at me, they had to stare at me just to see the professor who was in front of me.
Oh
So that
man.
made it even more uncomfortable.
Yeah, that is some of the most uncomfortable kind of situations that you can be in because I mean, you didn't ask for it. There's not a lot you can or can't do in some regards. And so you just kind of had to endure it because that was just part of the environment, right?
Right?
So, what actually got you through the point? You said you considered yourself more of an introvert, but your personality, to me, you're more of an extrovert. You're like a public speaker. I love it.
This is 54 years later, Keith.
True,
And
true.
actually, I've done quite a bit of public speaking since my injury. I've had a lot of people encourage me to share my story with others. And initially, I thought, I don't know what there is to share. It's an unfortunate accident, and I'm kind of struggling to get by. But a lot of people encouraged me to do it. And I was very surprised when people actually asked me to get in front of a group and talk. And one of the first talks that I gave, I was asked to be the graduation speaker at Dryden High School in upstate New York
Huh,
the year after I went back to Cornell.
huh.
And I was shocked by that. I didn't even know the students knew who I was. And here they asked me to be the speaker. And it was very nerve wracking to get
Oh,
in front of a group and give a talk in front of hundreds of people.
oh yeah, especially for something that you probably didn't even think was even a slight possibility or anything. Like, did you open that letter and you were like, "Oh, holy cow, like I got to do what now?" Like,
It was actually a phone call from the
oh,
principal And he took me totally by surprise. And I was just basically saying, we'd like you to be the speaker. And I'm just, okay, without really thinking in detail about it. And it hit me later. What did I just agree to? And in terms of going back to Cornell, I can remember after my first day having my attendant lie me down in bed.
Hmm.
And I remember staring at the ceiling, just thinking I had to be crazy to decide to go back to Cornell, such an inaccessible campus. And so soon after I was discharged from the hospital,
Hmm.
but I started thinking, what else am I going to do? And I didn't have a plan B.
Hmm.
I didn't know what else I was going to do if I
Uh,
didn't succeed at Cornell.
uh,
So I worked especially hard to make sure that it worked.
yeah, that's awesome. And did you choose Cornell because you're just like stubborn and you said, I started, I'm going to finish? Or was it
That's
something
pretty
else?
much it. As I said, I thought maybe if I just ignore my injury, it'll go away.
Oh.
So I figured, you know what? I'm just going to pick up where I left off. I'll
Mhm.
go back to school. I'll continue my studies in industrial engineering, and maybe it'll just go away on its own. Well, that was pretty naive on my part. And again, if you would have spoken to anybody in the medical profession, they probably would have criticized me and said he's just not accepting his injury or disability. And they
Hmm.
were right. I wasn't.
Good. Good. It's one of those things that it's your body and you know limits to it that no one else will ever know. And it seems like you were saying, well, where is my limit if I am supposed to have one? Where is it?
That's right. And in my mind, I'm not going to have any limits. I'm going to
Yeah.
still do everything I wanted to do.
Yeah, I love that attitude. And that's why everyone wants you to go speak for them and just share your story because it's one of those that I mean, whenever we think about our bodies, they're the element between our brain and our mind and the physical world around us. So that's how we interact with everything. If we can't move, then it's like, well, have you seen Futurama?
No,
Oh
no,
man, you haven't? Uh,
no.
so, you might find this aspect a little funny, but in Futurama, there's characters that are nothing but heads in jars, and they're all like presidents of the past and stuff, and they're all really comical. But it was just like if we didn't have a body, that would be like it, right? Just like kind of like you being carried off the field in the first place.
That's right. That's
So.
right. And often that's what it feels like.
And but you're so much more than just a head, and you actually use your brain for so much good. So whenever you graduated from Cornell the first time, how did it feel whenever you actually got that diploma?
Well, it felt incredible. I mean, I think nobody was more surprised than I was that I was able to actually do it. I had difficulty with my engineering studies before my injury,
Oh yeah.
and it was 1,000 times more difficult after my injury.
Hmm.
And just to give you an idea how surprised it was for everybody that I was able to graduate, I wish I still had this article. I can no longer find it. But there was actually an article written about me in the National Enquirer. The
Oh
Enquirer did a story about me graduating from Cornell. That's how unusual it was considered at that time.
wow, that is really cool. Um, I'm actually looking to see if I can find it for you.
I
Um,
tried and I couldn't locate it.
and
It was back in 1973 in the summer,
yep,
and
and
I just wish I could find the copy again.
yeah, it looks like Anna Kunk was looking for it as well and posted
Yeah,
a
yeah, we looked.
Oh man. Well, tell you what, if I ever come across it, I'll send it your way. So,
Thank you.
of
Mm.
course. Uh and I mean, what were your plans after you graduated though? Because it was like, cool, you got that goal, but now it's like, where do you go with that goal, right? Because sometimes whenever we finish a goal, it's like, cool. And now what?
Well, right. Well, what happened was, fortunately, I had taken some electives in the field of psychology.
Oh.
And one of my psychology professors, by the name of Dr. James Moss, suggested that I pursue a career in psychology and in counseling.
Huh.
He felt that if I entered the counseling profession, I could hopefully help others overcome adversity and face challenges. So I decided to pursue a career in counseling. And I stayed at Cornell and I earned a Master of Arts degree where I majored in counseling and student personnel administration. And as you indicated, I became the first quadriplegic to ever earn a graduate degree from Cornell. And then I tried to increase my counseling credentials. I went to Columbia University, where I
Mm-hmm.
earned my second master's degree. This was a Master of Education degree, where I majored in counseling and student personnel administration. And I
Mm-hmm.
decided to look for a job as a counselor in the rehabilitation counseling. And
Mm-hmm.
this was in the mid 70s. And here, Keegan, I had 2 degrees from Cornell,
Mm-hmm.
one from Columbia,
Uh-huh.
3 prestigious Ivy League degrees,
Yeah.
2 master's degrees,
Mm-hmm.
and no one would hire me.
What?
I looked for a job for a year and sent out more than 200 resumes.
Whoa.
Um, it seemed everybody felt that I was just too disabled to work. All right.
Mm.
And I was even turned down when I offered to volunteer my services. I
Wow.
couldn't give my services away. But finally, I found one organization willing to give me the opportunity to show what I could do. And
Mm.
that the organization is Abilities Incorporated, which was part of what was then called the Human Resources Center, is now called the Viscardi Center after its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr.
Okay.
And they're on Long Island, and they hired me to work as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, working with other individuals who had severe disabilities. And as
Mm.
it turned out, I was more severely disabled than any of the people I was counseling.
Wow. I mean,
Mm.
it doesn't really leave a whole lot of room whenever you only got a little bit of your arm and a little bit of shoulder, right?
Right?
But that is super cool. And I mean, first of all, I'm kind of stumpfounded. I just made a new word, stumpfounded. I'm stumpfounded that no one would even hire you with those degrees and everything because on paper it's like, holy cow, this guy is really accomplished. He knows his stuff. I want him on my team. But then like on the resume, did you put also paraplegic or quadriplegic?
Yes, I did. I felt um, it was something that the interviewer should know so they're not totally shocked when they see me. And unfortunately, it still happens today.
Mm.
People with disabilities still have difficulty today
Mm-hmm.
finding a job, although fortunately it's gotten a lot better over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But 50 years ago, you didn't see many quadriplegics in the workforce. You didn't even see them out in public
Mm-mm.
because, there weren't any curb cuts back then or wheelchair ramps. So it
Mm-hmm.
was difficult for somebody to get around. There was, no public transportation for people in wheelchairs.
Mm-hmm.
It was very difficult to get around. So you weren't very visible back then in the
Yeah.
public's mind.
Yeah, and I mean, whenever we think about it in that regard, I mean, so many other people probably suffered a similar injury and just listened to that same doctor that you had. And
With that in mind, when I was in the Rusk Institute for rehab, it seemed like all of my roommates, who had been hurt a lot longer than I was, weren't doing much with their lives. They were basically just sitting home. And
mm,
they had been hurt a lot longer than I was. And,
mhm,
I really fault that on the advice and encouragement that they either were not receiving at all or just didn't get the proper advice.
mm,
I guess they were not encouraged to go on and do more with their lives. It was more like, you have this disability, you need to accept it.
mm. Man, and that is something that you just did not do, and absolutely love that. So, how did you go from working with the disabled? And by the way, I gotta say, like, as an addict alcoholic, I gotta say that the people that can work with me or uh, that sub label of people, whatever you want to call it, is someone that's been through addiction themselves and come out on the other side. So, I mean, it makes sense that someone such as yourself is helping other people with disabilities because you get all the nuances, you get all the complexities, you get the inner workings of like how this actually makes someone feel whenever they can't do what everyone else seems to be able to do so easily, right?
Absolutely. And the fact that I was more physically limited than the people I was counseling, I
Hmm.
hoped would encourage others to say, you know what, if I can work, they can work,
Mm-hmm.
and they could still do a lot with their lives. And for me to, excuse me, be in that position where now I could help others instead of just receiving help did wonders for me. I mean, it increased my self esteem, my feelings of self worth, my self confidence. It made an enormous difference in how I looked at my own life.
Yeah, because you're finally able to actually give back to the world in a way that is deemed meaningful to you, right? Because
Absolutely. And that was so important to me to be able to do that.
yeah, because I mean, it's one thing to exist in the world and to take in all the great things that it has, but if you're not putting back out, if you're not helping the next person, what's the point, right?
Right.
So,
So I was fortunate that this organization, Abilities Inc., hired me.
mhm,
And as a result, I want to encourage other employers that there's an awful lot somebody with a disability can do if they're just given the opportunity.
mhm,
And, I've made it one of my missions is to encourage employers to hire people with disabilities
yeah,
and to just keep their expectations a lot higher than they normally seem to be for somebody with a disability. Oftentimes a person's performance rises or falls based upon what others expect of them. And if
hmm,
you expect the best from somebody, oftentimes they'll rise up to meet those expectations. And I
right.
think that's so important.
Yeah, for sure. And you unfortunately had to, well, unfortunately suffer the other end of that. You were told that you wouldn't amount to and do well and just actually be. So, like, how, in like a couple of words, what would you say to anyone out there doubting their abilities, whether it be physical or mental?
You have to believe in yourself. I mean, while it's important to accept help when it's offered, and hopefully you will get the right amount of help, it's ultimately up to you to make something of your life.
Mm,
And you need to be determined and self motivated if need be to go out and do everything you can despite what your limitations are. I mean,
mm,
we all face challenges in our lives. Some challenges are obviously bigger than others, but it's how we deal with those challenges that will make the difference between someone who is good and someone who is great. And I'd like to believe that we all have the potential to do far more with their lives than most people ever even dream is possible. And if they work hard, hopefully they'll achieve what their goals and dreams are.
mm, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. I'm sure a lot of people out there are going to hear that and be like, I need to get off my butt and actually go do something now. um, and in that regard, you did say to stay self-motivated. Would you call that also being a little bit selfish if you have to?
If need be, because there were many times when people tried to discourage me and say, accept your situation and be grateful for what you're doing
Hmm.
and what you have and don't make waves. And
Mm.
my feeling was, no, that's not the way to be. And, I was fortunate that when I worked at the Viscardi Center, they
Hmm.
kept increasing my responsibilities and expanding my role. And one of the things they had me do was speak to groups and organizations concerning non discrimination and affirmative action with respect to people with disabilities.
Mm.
And after my talks, I would often be asked questions. And while I would certainly do my best to respond appropriately, I was always careful to caution the questioners they should really consult with a lawyer about their concerns. And Keegan, I guess it didn't take long before I started to think, there's no reason why I couldn't become that lawyer.
Yeah.
So I left my job at the Viscardi Center and I went to Hofstra University School of Law. And after graduating, I actually changed my career perspective. My brother was a lawyer. He's 2 years older than me. And he was working as a defense attorney for the Legal
Mm.
Aid Society. But he encouraged me to do an internship with the district attorney's office
Okay.
because, there I would have more physical assistance. There were paralegals and secretaries and detectives and police officers. And, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that could help and student interns.
Mm-hmm.
And, my office was right in the same building as the courthouse.
Huh.
So I did an internship there, loved it, applied for a full-time job there, and I
Mm-hmm.
was fortunate that in 1979, the district attorney at the time, a person by the name Dennis Dillon, was a very forward-thinking, self-confident prosecutor who had the guts to base his hiring decision on my abilities rather than my disability. And he hired me to work as an assistant district attorney, where I worked for more than 40 years.
Wow, that is way too cool. And what was his name again? Dennis Dillon?
Dennis Dillon, Dillon. And he was a phenomenal boss, a phenomenal district attorney. And at the time he hired me, I didn't know of another quadriplegic that was a trial attorney, let alone an assistant district attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they may have been out there, but I didn't know about them. I mean, you didn't have the internet
Yeah.
as active as it is, right now. So I never heard about somebody, going into court when they were as physically limited as I was.
Mm-hmm.
But he had the guts and the foresight to hire me. And I'll always be grateful for him for doing that as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I can offer I can honestly say that I offer my gratitude to him as well because we wouldn't be having this awesome conversation and a lot of people would probably be feeling really disheartened throughout the years, right?
Right? So, he hired me, and based on his confidence in me, I was very fortunate that I worked hard and was promoted a number of times in the office to where I eventually became one of our deputy bureau chiefs,
Oh wow.
where then I was in a position where I was helping supervise more than 25 other assistant district attorneys.
Whoa. That's so cool. So it seems like you're really speaking from experience whenever you say if you set expectations for someone, they'll rise up to it, right?
Right.
Oh man.
And with the proper help, support, and encouragement, and given the opportunity when they merit it, there's an awful lot a person can do.
Oh man. However, I do want to ask something along those lines. Now, whenever we set the bar really high for someone such as myself that has a lot of anxiety issues goes, I have to be perfect all of a sudden, right? I have to aim for perfection. But that's not what you're saying. You're just saying do your best, right?
That's right. That's exactly what I'm saying. And believe me, I experienced a lot of anxiety along the way as well, because here I knew a lot of people were placing confidence in me.
Hmm.
And I, quite frankly, wasn't sure I merited all that confidence.
Oh
But I
man.
tried to use it as another motivating factor to do even more than I was doing.
Oh, okay. So using motivation in that regard is totally a little bit different than what I've actually thought of before because to me it would have been fear. Like, I've got a lot of fear in me and I don't know if I can do this. And old me would just run into the corner and drink until all my problems just got bigger and then I'd have to drink more and so on.
Keegan, it got to the point where my family was working so hard to help me in every way that they could that I was feeling like I would disappoint them if I
Mm,
didn't do everything I could do to continue to achieve and progress. And that pushed me even more to try and do the best job I could possibly do.
man. So it really sounds like you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for your family, your friends, and all the other people that need a voice whenever they don't have someone to speak up for them, right?
Yes, and as a result, I felt a certain responsibility to do as best I could do because it may affect employers' decisions whether to hire somebody else with a disability.
Hmm.
If they see that, somebody gave me the opportunity and I wasn't able to do what was expected of me, it may discourage them from hiring somebody else with a disability. So I
Mm,
was feeling that responsibility as well.
yeah.
And I did my best to not only do well, but to encourage people to hire others with disabilities.
Yeah. And that is so freaking cool. And I love that you were able to just blaze a trail for everyone else because I mean, it is one of those things that I take for granted whenever I see like a handicap sign or this, that, or another. And I'm grateful that I don't have to utilize them. But at the same time, whenever I see someone parked in a handicap spot that shouldn't be there, I have second thoughts about doing something to their car. And mostly just leaving a note on there, just being like, but that's the thing is that we don't really take into account the things that we take for granted. So,
Right? And you know what, Keegan? I was so fortunate that the Viscardi Center gave me this opportunity.
mhm.
And I'm so proud to say that they remembered the work that I did when I was there. And 30 years after I left, the president of Abilities Incorporated called me on the phone and asked me to be a member of their board of directors, which
Whoa.
I very proudly accepted. And now, starting in 2009, I've worked first on the Abilities Inc. board of directors, and then beginning in 2017 on the board of directors of their parent company, the full Viscardi Center. I'm on their board of directors, and I'm so proud and happy that I've been able to remain involved in helping people with disabilities do more with their lives than most people ever thought was possible.
Oh yeah, that is way too cool. I mean, being on a board of directors, holy cow. Like, I mean, that is one of those not only like status symbol, but it is a marker of progression and just achievements that you've done. And you also are humble enough to say that you didn't necessarily do it all yourself.
I definitely didn't do it all myself. Keegan, there was nothing I could have done
Yeah.
without a lot of help from others. And
And
I'm devoting my life to now giving that back and helping others as best I can.
yeah, and I absolutely love that. And it is what this world needs. And we need more Ken Kunkens. We need a lot more of you. um,
Well, I'm doing my best to produce some. So if I might just stretch the conversation a little,
yeah.
I've been very fortunate in my education and in my work life.
Uh-huh.
But what I'm most proud of, Keegan, is my personal life.
Oh.
So if I may be so bold, is
Uh-huh.
to say, I made up my mind. I was going to try and do everything I wanted to do before my injury
Mm-hmm.
to still do that. And that included dating,
Ah.
and as you might expect, dating when you're a quadriplegic and trying to impress a woman when you're almost totally paralyzed poses its own unique set of challenges.
Yeah.
And it took me a while before I met the perfect woman for me. Her name
Ah.
is Anna. She's actually sitting right off camera to my right. And Anna's the most incredible person I ever met.
Mm-hmm.
But, shortly after my injury, I'd kind of decided that, I would never get married because I
Mm.
felt it would be too limiting for asking a woman to be my wife and,
Mm-hmm.
be married to somebody with such physical limitations.
Yeah.
But it was actually my Aunt Betty, as well as some others, as well as Anna,
Mm-hmm.
who convinced me there was a lot I could offer to a
Mm-hmm.
woman. And with their encouragement, I decided to marry Anna. And just a couple of weeks ago, we celebrated our 22nd wedding anniversary.
Woohoo! Congratulations.
Thank you, Keegan. And the story still gets better than that. In fact, it was actually Anna that
Whoa.
proposed to me.
Whoa, wow.
Yeah, which made it even more special. Made it a little easier for me to go through with the marriage
Yeah.
when I knew she was actually the one that proposed.
Yeah.
But when Anna and I talked about getting married, Anna said that she wanted to have my baby. And
Mm.
not just a baby, my baby. She
Uh-huh.
said she wanted to see a little Kunken running around our home. So, when you say, I want to encourage others to follow in my footsteps,
Mm-hmm.
well, now the decision was, should I become a father?
Yeah.
And I really questioned whether that would be appropriate for me and whether it's something I wanted to do. But
Uh-huh.
with his honest encouragement, we looked into various options,
Mm-hmm.
including in vitro fertilization.
Oh.
And despite the fact that I had been paralyzed for more than 30 years at the time,
Mm-hmm.
I found it still might be possible for someone in my condition to father a child.
Ooh.
So, with Anna's help and suggestions, we pursued in vitro fertilization. And through the
Uh,
miracle of science, Anna became pregnant.
oh,
And on January 24th, 2005, Keegan, I was present in the delivery room. Think
oh,
about this, picture this. I was present in the delivery room when my wife Anna gave birth to triplets.
whoa.
We have three incredible sons, Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy. They've
Uh-huh.
just completed their sophomore year in three separate colleges in upstate New York.
Whoa.
They're the light of my life. They're incredible kids and doing absolutely great.
Dude, that is way too cool. Holy cow. Congratulations on all of that because I mean from the beginning of just like should I date, can I date, what do and then all the way up to actually having triplets and they're graduating colleges and stuff.
Yeah. Well, they just finished their sophomore years.
Uh-huh.
One is at State University of New York at Morrisville studying renewable energy.
Ooh.
One is at Syracuse pursuing a dual major
Wow.
in communications in the Newhouse School of Public Communications and the Maxwell School of Public Policy.
Mhm.
And he wants to be a journalist.
Ah.
And my son Joey, 50 years after I graduated Cornell, started attending Cornell. And
Uh,
he's majoring in mechanical engineering.
that is way too cool. Just make sure he doesn't play any football.
That's for sure. Although they're actually all three are martial artists. All
Oh,
three of them are second degree black belts in the martial art Taekwondo, and they're in terrific physical condition.
that is way too cool. And it definitely seems like your brain has definitely traveled along the genetics. And
Well, fortunately, they get a lot of it from Anna, and they are way smarter than I am.
it's the combined effort, it's a combined effort. So it just makes everything that much better. Um, but real quick, what was the name of your book again, and where can
All
people find
right.
it?
Well, let me tell you about that. My
Okay.
book is called I Dream of Things That Never Were, the
Uh-huh.
Ken Kunken story. It's actually on the bookshelf right above me, right
Hmm.
above my shoulder. And the way I got that title was while I was still a patient in a rehab facility in April of 1971, I was asked to testify before a United States Health Subcommittee chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy.
Hmm.
And 8 days after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a glass paperweight in the mail that had an inscription on it
Hmm.
that the senator said his late brother Robert Kennedy liked very much. And the inscription was actually a quote that Robert Kennedy used to say basically at the end of all his talks. And the
Hmm.
inscription read, some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not. And
Uh,
that's where I got the title of my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were.
oh man, that is way too cool. I love that story. And people can find it on Amazon or anything like that real
Right. They
quick?
can find it on Amazon as well as other sites. If they
Okay.
go on my website, which is
Oh.
kenkunken.com,
Mhm.
that will tell you different ways that they could purchase the book, which is available not only in hardcover, but in
Okay.
an ebook, in a Kindle version, as well as in an audio book that I narrated.
Mhm. Okay. Oh, you narrated it yourself too.
Right.
That
It's almost 16 hours long. It's also in various libraries. So, there are a
Okay.
lot of different ways that they could either purchase it or obtain it to read it
Okay,
or
cool.
listen to it.
I was about to say if you narrated it and it was translated, did you do the translation as well?
Well, actually, my wife is working on translating it into Polish. My wife is
Whoa.
from Poland, and she's working on translating it into Polish. But I was actually the one that read it in English, and it's almost 16 hours long.
Oh wow. That is cool that it's getting translated to Polish. That would have been like the one probably number 12 I would have guessed.
Right.
Um, so real quick, we are near the end of this episode, which really sucks because this is a really good conversation and I'm loving every second of it. So I have to ask real quick, do you think we could see you on in the future at some point to catch the parts that we didn't get to or maybe dive a little bit deeper?
That would be my pleasure, Keegan. You
Dude,
just let me
sweet.
know when.
All right, we can definitely do that. But real quick, we do have that new little game show segment if you want to try it out real quick.
I'll give it a try.
All righty. So let's see. Ken, sorry, excuse me. Ken, you've lived a life most people couldn't even dream up. So in this segment, we're flipping the script. Let's see what you dream up fast, fun, and a little off the wall. This is Ken You Imagine. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I just want you to give me an answer. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be short, it doesn't have to be intricate or anything. Just whatever flows off the top of your head. All right?
Okay.
All right. So, question number one: if you could have one superpower, but only while stuck in traffic, what would it be?
Well, it would obviously be the superpower to probably beam myself up like they did in Star Trek and avoid all the traffic by getting to where I wanted to be in the next instant.
I think that should be everyone's. I love it. All right. Question number two: which fictional courtroom lawyer would you want on your legal dream team?
Well, that's strange for me because virtually every lawyer show dealt with defense attorneys, and here I was a prosecutor my whole career. So I guess I would have to refer to the show Law and Order, where near the end they would show prosecutors. No names jump out at me for a prosecutor,
Mhm.
but it was somebody on the prosecution side of the bench.
All right. You've raised a good point. I never really thought about that before. All right. Moving on to number three. If your power wheelchair turned into a time machine, where's the first place you'd roll to?
Well, it would be, you know, first a place in the future
Hmm.
where hopefully they would have some more advanced treatments for somebody in my condition
Right.
where I could eventually be able to get out of this wheelchair, which would
Wow.
be ideal. Initially when you said that, I was starting to think would I like to go back in time
Hmm.
and avoid my injury? And Keegan, I'd have to be perfectly honest and say, no. If that meant that I wouldn't have my incredible wife or my three wonderful, wonderful, wonderful sons, I would not want to do that.
Oh man, I love that. Thank you for being able to see the good in everything that has happened and willing to cherish it and not want to change a single moment. That takes something special. All right. Number four. What's the title of your next book if it were a comedy?
Well, it would be basically don't do as I do, do as I say.
I love that one too. And I mean, that would be really fitting, right? Don't play football.
It sure would.
All right. Moving on to number five. If if one of your triplets had to play you in a movie, who gets the role and why?
They all have parts of me in their personality as well as in their looks.
Mhm.
And they are so similar in so many ways and so different in so many ways. My wife and her family keep saying that my son Timothy seems to look the most like me. But, when I look at my son James, I always thought he looked just the way I looked when I was a younger version of myself.
Mm.
And my son Joey reminds me so much of my older brother Steve that I think it has to be a combination of all three
Ah.
that would do the best job in playing their father.
So it would be a little bit of like a you get this part in this age range, you get this part in this age range, and so on.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I mean, it would make sense, right? It would make a lot of sense. All right. Number six. What snack should be renamed in your honor?
Oh boy. My favorite food has always been chocolate.
Ah.
And if that brought, a smile on everybody's face, if they called it Ken Kunken's chocolate or something of that nature, I hope they're smiling when they're consuming it.
Oh, I love that. It's kind of like Willy Wonka, except better, right?
Right.
So, number six. Sorry, number seven. If you got to write one law that everyone had to follow, what would it be?
Be accepting of everyone. Try and
Ooh.
eliminate prejudice whenever they can. I think that's so important. And I might add that for some reason, there seems to be a negative impression of diversity, equity, and inclusion these days, DEI. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe people are misunderstanding the benefits of inclusion, of equity, of diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be to strengthen DEI and not weaken it.
Yes. Yes. I love it. Thank you for bringing that up. That was something that I kind of wanted to touch on, but whenever I saw the time, I was like, we don't have time to dive into that. That sucks. Um, so number 8, would you rather argue a case in front of a jury of dogs or coach a football team of squirrels?
Well, I never liked appearing before anybody. I did a lot of motivational speaking
Mm.
and never enjoyed getting up in front of a group and giving a talk. So if the choice is between getting up in front of a group or being in the back helping encourage a group, no
Ooh.
matter what animals they are, I'd rather not be in front of everyone.
So we're going with a coach for the squirrels.
Right.
All righty. Number 9, what's the funniest or weirdest question someone's ever asked you about your wheelchair?
Well, I get asked a lot by people who look at me and have a quizzical look, and
Mhm.
they ask me, "Do I sleep in my wheelchair?" Um, and the answer is there are times when I fall asleep while I'm in my wheelchair. But no, my wife lifts me out of the wheelchair each night into a bed, and I sleep in bed. But I've been amazed how many people actually ask me if I sleep in my wheelchair.
Hmm. Fair enough. I mean, that is one of those ones that I guess people just really don't think, right?
Right?
And so real quick, shout out to Anna. Thank you for taking care of Ken as long as you have. It's amazing.
Thank you. And one other thing that you may comment on is my wife, Anna, who is so incredible, is actually 19 years younger than I am.
Oh
And I
wow.
get asked many, many times, is she my daughter? People seem to have a hard time imagining that, no, she's my wife.
Uh-huh.
Everybody seems to think she's my daughter. So I get asked that a lot also.
Nope, you're just one heck of a guy that can pull anyone that they wanted to, and you just got her.
Thank you.
Of
I
course.
agree. I'm a very lucky guy.
Absolutely. And last up, number 10. If your memoir had a blooper reel, what's definitely on it?
Well, boy, there have been so many times where I've had problems with just controlling some of my physical activities. When I was studying counseling, I did an internship at the Bronx Veterans Administration Hospital.
Hmm.
And, I would wheel into patients' room and introduce myself as their counselor. And I still get a lot of muscle spasms where my arms and legs would shake involuntarily. And
Hmm.
if my arm was still on the control switch of my wheelchair, at the time I entered a room, as I'm introducing myself, I would fly right past the patient and crash into a wall as I'm introducing myself as their new counselor. So I think that raised a lot of questions in their mind.
I mean, it broke the ice in the best way possible. All right. Thank you very much for playing Can You Imagine, Ken? Now, you're a man who tackled injustice with the same courage that once put you on the field. From the courtroom to the Capitol, from rehabilitation to revolution, you embody a life of impact beyond the imaginable. So, here at Retrieving Sanity, we would like to offer you the honorary title of the Indomitable Advocate because we're not able to stop you no matter what we do.
Well, I'd be honored by that title. Thank you so much.
Of course, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on, Ken. But one last thing I've got, this podcast is called Retrieving Sanity. So, Retrieving Sanity explores every facets of life and mental health. But what does retrieving sanity mean to you today personally, and what's something that someone can use in their journey for retrieving sanity?
Well, for me, it had to be to go from the depths of depression and despair to what I would think is the pinnacle of happiness and success. I couldn't be happier than I am to be the husband of my incredible wife, Anna, and the father of my triplet sons. So, by retrieving sanity, I know what it's like to be at the very bottom when it comes to, you know, thinking about yourself and losing self confidence. And there were times when I actually wanted to lose my mind, I thought it would be easy to deal with what I was going through than be so depressed and discouraged by the rehabilitation that I was facing. And I'm so glad that I've come out on the other side and I'm leading a very, very happy life, a very, very proud father, a very, very proud husband, a proud brother, a proud cousin, a proud nephew. I mean, I have so many wonderful things going for me in life. Uh, Life is great. Life is beautiful. And I love it.
Oh, thank you very much for those wise words of wisdom, Ken, because I think everyone could use a little bit of that because life just is hard, you know. But real quick, the last thing again, we can find you at kenkunken.com, correct?
Right.
All
That's right.
right. And unfortunately, we are past the time for this episode. So we'll see you on again in the future. And I mean, this has just been an absolute honor and a pleasure speaking to someone such as yourself because I mean, I can't even, I've just spoke to you and I'm still like, how did he do it?
Egan, the time flew by for me as well. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. And everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. And as always, much love to yourself, much love to everyone around you if you can, but love yourself first and just try to be a good person. It's not that hard. And don't park in a handicapped spot if you're not handicapped. So, with
Right.
that, with that being said, Ken, do you got any last words for the audience?
I think you've said it all, Keegan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And everyone out there, y'all have a great evening, and we'll see y'all next time. Much love. Shalom. And stop. Woohoo.